I wanted to start by introducing myself. So I'm Jill Nagel. You guys have not had a chance to meet me yet. I am our SWE-ECI secretary. I've been involved with SWE-ECI for like 8 years now, and previously involved with the University of Iowa SWE previous to becoming a professional. And I'm here today to mediate the interviews because it's finally Nicole's chance to be interviewed as a biomedical engineer. So I'm really excited to be with you guys today and finally meet you. I've heard great things about this program, and thank you for having me. So without further ado, we've got 3 amazing female biomedical engineers in the house. I know at least 2 of them have taken very different career paths, so this will be a really interesting and very enlightening interview for you guys to learn about biomedical engineering. So without further ado, I'll let them introduce themselves and explain what you do in your current role or career. Nicole, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. So like I say before every one of these recordings, I work at Civco Medical Solutions. We make products that are for ultrasound devices. So we don't actually make the ultrasound probes themselves, but we manufacture devices related to ultrasound probes. So like the probe cover that goes over the probe during a procedure to prevent infections, disinfection equipment, storage equipment, so everything else besides for the actual probe. And I'm an associate product line manager. So I actually have kind of taken a path through engineering and now more into the business world. So I'm doing half of an engineering role, half of a business person's role, which is really just making sure that I can understand the voice of the customer and communicate that what customers want and pitch those projects. And then I'm the project engineer that actually gets to lead those products, or projects. So it's kind of an interesting role. Rose, if you want to go next.
Hi, my name is Rose. I am actually still a student. So I'm a 4th year PhD student at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And so I do full-time research. I work on specifically infectious disease diagnostics for developing countries. So that has been an exciting field to be in as of late. But I also study immunology and how nutrition comes into that as well.
Jill, you're on mute, by the way.
Thanks. That's very interesting, is what I said. Jackie?
Hey everyone, my name's Jackie. I did engineering school back from 2010 to 2014. So Jill was just a year ahead of me. We got to be good friends back in the day. But after engineering school, I decided to go to medical school. And now I'm a general surgery resident at the University of Iowa. I'm currently in what we call our research year. So I step away from clinical duties for 2 years and do research, and I'm working on a master's in clinical investigation, but related to engineering. I'm currently working on a device to remove magnets from children's bowels that are hard to reach surgically, and then working on a device that has to do with refeeding infants, and then have a few other projects in the docket related to actual devices. And then I've also had some experience working with the Department of Defense on wireless monitoring. So my routes may be a little bit different than most who have interest in engineering, but it's been really cool to see my world of medicine and surgery collide with the world of engineering. So
That's amazing. So we have 3 women that studied biomedical engineering undergrad, and they went really 3 different ways. So Nicole went to the professional world, Rose went to graduate school, and Jackie went the medical school route. So this is awesome. You guys are getting some good insight here as to all the different routes for biomedical engineering. I do want to say, if you guys have any questions that pop up throughout the interview, please feel free to throw them in the chat. And we can get to them. I do have some written questions, so we'll get started on those right away. But again, feel free to ask away. So my first question for you ladies, can you explain what biomedical engineering is, and give us some background on what type of engineering it involves?
Yeah, I'll just go first every time unless I can't think of an answer, and I'll kick it off to someone else. But so really the way that biomedical engineering differs from other types of engineering that you guys have listened and heard about is that it focuses on helping people, and specifically within healthcare. So anything that revolves around hospitals, that's what biomedical engineers are involved with. So whether it's getting the devices made to go into a hospital, or whether it's doing research on those devices or patients, or whether it's actually working on those patients with those devices. So really anything within the healthcare realm. And I actually made a note to say something that is really that you can really see within this panel. Jill kind of alluded to it, but when you start biomedical engineering at Iowa, they always say, okay, about a third of you will go into industry, a third of you will go into research, and a third of you will go into med school. And that's exactly what we have here tonight, which was not planned. So that's very true, is that you can take very different paths within biomedical engineering.
I always think of biomedical engineering as like a really broad field. So it kind of combines all of the different types of engineering, but specifically for the purpose of improving human health. And so I know a lot of people who do really like very biology oriented research. I tend to build devices. And so you can go into a lot of different fields with biomedical engineering, but kind of the main goal of all biomedical engineers is to build things or build systems that then can help improve health.
Yeah, I think the really cool thing that we're starting to see now too, you know, when I was in engineering school, they always said biomedical engineers are kind of the jack of all trades. We get training in you know, all different areas of engineering, because all those are applicable for biomedical engineering. And it's kind of fun now to see how all these new technologies are starting to evolve in healthcare. You know, they've been created in other disciplines and are being used in other disciplines, and now they're trying to make their way into healthcare. So AI, you know, big data, all these sort of things are kind of crashing into our world. And the people who are best suited to fill that role really are the biomedical engineers, who are kind of the jack of all trades that understand each of those areas and can kind of work with all those experts to bring it to that common goal. So it's a really cool field.
Awesome. So I know you guys elaborated on this a little bit on how biomedical engineering is different than other engineering, but are there any other tidbits of information to share along that line?
Yeah, I think Jackie said it well in terms of jack of all trades. You basically learn about everything, every discipline, and then relate it back to the human body. So for instance, you would learn about fluids or stacks of fluids is like, you think about water pressure and how that goes through a pipe. But in biomedical engineering, you think of it as in blood going through a vein. So you just think of it in a different realm. Or for statics, you think about the pressure that it would take to build like a building or a bridge. But in our case, it would be, well, how do the muscles interact with each other when there's pressure put on them for certain devices? Because you don't want to break a bone if you drill into the shoulder or whatever you're doing. So it's all those different engineerings, but how does it relate to the human body?
I think one thing to point out is there are a lot of biomedical engineers who do not start as biomedical engineers. So they start as mechanical engineers or electrical engineers or a different type of engineering. And then their role is to work on biology and human health. And so that kind of makes you into a biomedical engineer. So it really includes a lot of different disciplines, as everyone else has said. And so I think in this field in particular, you'll see a lot of people coming from different backgrounds, and that also makes it really fun to like be able to work with those people as well.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You know, the best teams are full of people with different perspectives and different opinions and different skill sets. And that's, you know, what leads to successful projects. So I think that's, you know, one of the best things in biomedical engineering is that you get all those different people involved.
Awesome. So my next question for you ladies, and this is going to be super interesting considering the different career paths you've been or gone on. But tell me about a day in the life of you in the office or in the hospital or whatever that looks like, in the research lab, and what really excites you about your job.
Yeah, so I can go first. As you've heard before, every day is different, but a couple of the exciting things that I've been able to do is for my first job at Civco, I was a field service engineer. So I actually got to go out into the field and repair equipment. So I'd get my hands dirty with the machines, you know, change out the circuit boards, figure out what was going wrong with the machines. That was really fun because it was very hands-on, and I was traveling a lot to different states in the United States. So got to see a lot of things and got to meet a lot of customers. And then now into my new role, I still get to be able to do those customer activities. And then one of the cool things that I'm working on now is I have a lot of products under my belt that we're trying to register internationally. So sometimes I get to work with different distributors and different customers from different countries. One that I'm working with closely right now is Japan. So it's just really fun, like working with another culture and just meeting people around the world. And then I'm also trying to register some products in Australia. So as it relates to you guys, but so that's pretty cool that you just get to feel that global impact that you're making. Rose?
So a day in my life also, it varies a lot. Generally, I work in a research lab. Specifically, I work in like a very biology-oriented lab. So we study infectious diseases. So we have kind of this special setup to make sure everyone stays safe. And right now, my project is trying to get correct antibody binding. So we're trying to get these molecules to bind to actually a piece of paper so that we can diagnose things on a piece of paper. And so generally what I'll do is I'll plan a couple experiments that usually end up lasting 2 or 3 weeks at a time. So like one set of data gathering will last multiple weeks. And so I'll either go into lab and do some pipetting, which is just moving fluids around basically, or I'll do a lot of data analysis. And then we have a lot of meetings with collaborators from around the country and around the world, which is really cool. So we'll have Zoom meetings. Actually, we did this before it was cool with the pandemic. We had a lot of Zoom meetings with everyone. And then a big part of my job right now is to write papers. Kind of the milestones in graduate school are you write these papers that show what you've discovered. And so right now I'm writing a paper, which takes a long time also because you got to gather the right data, make good charts so that other people can understand. So I spend a lot of time writing also. And one of the things that excites me about my job is I get to try things that no one else has tried before. And I think that's one of the really cool things about research is you are asking questions that don't have answers. And so you get to discover new things about biology and you get to make new products that have never existed before.
All right, so a day in my life is pretty hectic, and it really varies from day to day. So I'm gonna give you two different looks at what my life is like. So when I'm clinically active, meaning when I'm not in my research years, normally my day starts around 5 a.m. I get up and I go into the hospital and I round on my patients, and then I generally start operating around 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., kind of depending on if we have morning conferences. In between operating, I see patients in the ER or other places. But if I have some downtime, in the midst of between my cases, I can work on projects or things like that. And then later in the day, once my cases are done, that's generally my time to either study, because I am still learning as a resident every day, or I can work on my projects. And so that's generally when I spend my time, working on my research or device stuff. On the research side of things, right now, while I've been out on my research and doing my master's, I do cancer research related to access to care in rural areas. So in Iowa, we have a lot of farmland and a lot of small towns that are far away from hospitals. And so some of the research I do is how do we get those patients, how do we make a system, a healthcare system in a way that, you know, those patients have access to the best cancer care and the best technologies like radiation technology and things like that. And having an engineering background is actually really helpful because I understand the difference in those radiation technologies and why they can be so expensive, and understand, you know, the economic and the engineering side of those things, and why we can't get those to all, like every small town in America. So that's really interesting. And then I also focus a lot of my time on surgical education and simulation. So a big thing actually in biomedical engineering and in the medical world is actually creating simulators that can train doctors. Back in the day, like when my parents were young, you know, doctors trained by operating on people. But now a lot of our training is actually done through simulators and robots and things like that. And those were all created by biomedical engineers. So there's so much you can do, you know, and my day kind of just, it varies. You know, I've got a lot of projects going. So some days I'm working on devices and other days I'm teaching. And, you know, today I had a meeting. I would like to try and develop a center for surgical innovation at the University of Iowa, which is not really something we have right now, to create a more structured environment so that surgeons of any kinds can actually, you know, create devices and have more support, because there are a lot of physicians who have a lot of really great ideas, but unless you can get them out to companies and out into the market, you can't help patients. And so I think it's really neat to have a biomedical engineering background, because you can fill that gap and fill that role that helps, you know, both sides understand each other and get those products out to market and actually, you know, helping patients. So maybe that gives you a sense of what my life is like. It's kind of fun. Every day is different, and I really love that.
That's awesome. I feel like you guys need to partner with a company like Civco to help produce those things, but that's really neat. So I'm going to open it back up to the SWENExt group. Are there any questions at this time that you guys, ladies, can think of?
Yep, not at the moment.
Okay, just feel free to add them to chat.
Yep.
So my next question for you ladies, not so much related to biomedical engineering, but in the same way, somewhat related. What really got you into the STEM field, and how did you decide that you wanted to be a biomedical engineer? Did you always want to be a biomedical engineer, or did you maybe start, you know, in high school? What were you thinking you wanted to be when you grew up? And maybe even early on in college, you changed your mind. So let us know what your how you got to your biomedical engineering degree.
Yeah, so in second grade and sixth grade, I think both of my teachers said that I would be great at being an engineer. And at that time, I had no idea what that meant. You know, if you think of the train engineer, like I don't want to drive trains. I think that's the right word. And so once they explained to me what that was, I understood a little bit. They said that if you like math and science, it's something that you're going to want to go into, because it's a great career that you just, if you want to go to industry, you can do 4 years and get a pretty good degree out of it, and make decent money. So I was considering doing it. And then I was actually between doing biomedical engineering at the University of Iowa or doing like psychology and neuroscience degree at a different college. And that was because I really like to just learn how people work in general. So specifically their brains, like why people do what they do. And so I flipped a coin because I couldn't decide, and it actually flipped to neuroscience. And for some reason, I just knew in my gut that I had to do engineering because it was what other people had been telling me that I should go into. And it seemed like, I should probably listen to these people. So I tried it out, went against the coin toss, and I ended up really liking it. And I did minor in psychology, so I could still do that for some fun classes. But that's how I decided, was just based off of other teachers giving me advice on what I would be good at.
So my path to biomedical engineering, I guess, was very personal. So I was born with a genetic disorder, that affects my joints. And so I had a lot of trouble walking when I was younger. And that has lasted until today, but it's gotten a lot better, partially through the help of biomedical engineers who are doing research. So I grew up in Wisconsin, and Mayo Clinic is like this big hospital in Minnesota. So it's only like a couple hours from my hometown. And so we used to go to Mayo Clinic to find care because this genetic disorder is pretty rare. And they had a whole team of biomedical engineers who were doing research on the best methods to help kids like me learn to walk again. And so I ended up meeting a lot of people, and I really saw how impactful it could be, and specifically in my life, like they helped me so much. And like all I wanted to do was like be able to help people, you know. I think that's a really like common goal of a lot of biomedical engineers. And I liked math and science. I thought I would do well in engineering school. So it was a great combination of things that I was interested in. I was really interested in building things. And then I had a really personal connection. And then I wanted to help people. So that's why I chose to go into biomedical engineering.
So, you know, I had a lot of dreams, I think, when I was a kid that I would get like my PhD in physical education and be a gym teacher because for some reason, that seemed like the right thing to do. But as I got older, you know, I was very like gifted at math, and I really enjoyed math and science. And so a lot of people, again, you know, suggested, you know, I look into like being an engineer or a doctor, something that, you know, you use a lot of math and science in. And I had gotten to go on like some field trips up to Rockwell Collins in Cedar Rapids, which is an aerospace engineering company here in the area. And I thought it was so cool, everything that they did there. And so the more I thought about things, the more I realized I wanted to go to engineering school. And if I did biomedical engineering, I could combine that love of, you know, math and science and anatomy in the body. And when I got into engineering school, I started volunteering actually at the hospital, and I went to the ICUs, you know, a couple of times a week and volunteered there. And I really liked it. I liked getting to know the patients. I liked working with the staff. But I didn't know, you know, if like being a doctor was what I wanted to be. It was a lot more school. And I really, you know, I thought I really liked what I was doing in engineering. So I went off and had a summer internship for a company, and I was doing some really neat projects with a Department of Defense for like wireless monitoring systems for the Navy SEALs during their training to monitor their health status. And I thought it was awesome. And then one day, this guy came in for lunch, and he was there to meet with the CEO of this small company out in Des Moines that I was working with. And it turns out this guy was a military doctor. And the CEO of the company brought me in, and we ended up chatting with this guy for a couple hours. And, you know, I was so curious about what he did as a doctor in the military. And it was kind of weird. Like that day, I realized like I wanted to be a doctor too. And so I went back to Iowa, and I had to change my whole schedule up to try and get all my classes done in time so I could still graduate in 4 years to go to medical school. But it all worked out. So I just realized that I had passion for patients too. And so I knew I could do both still as a doctor. It would just be a little bit different than I had originally imagined. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at.
Awesome. So I have a couple, as we were chatting, a couple questions for individuals that I'm curious about. So thought I would share. So Rose, I'm curious, how has your day-to-day life or what you're researching changed since COVID all started, or refocused since COVID started?
Yeah, so it's actually had there's been big changes for me. So as soon as the pandemic became a thing and things were getting shut down, there was a really high demand for diagnostic testing, which is exactly what our lab does. And that's what I had been working on for 3 years at that point. So we quickly switched everything. We were targeting other viruses. So I specifically worked on an HIV test, and hepatitis virus. So I was developing tests for that, but it was very easily translated to COVID. And so we did coronavirus testing. We are actually involved in some of the setup of diagnostic testing at Cornell. So we got to be involved in that. And then actually one of the interesting things was there was a global shortage of these reagents, of the things that you use to do the diagnostic test. And so I had to switch projects from a technique called PCR, which is what they use for coronavirus diagnostics nowadays, to doing more protein analysis. So while the reagents had a global shortage. So I actually learned a lot about coronavirus. I learned a lot about being flexible at work and the different diagnostic tests that we can do. So it's been an exciting time. And actually, we built a device that was used in New York City for coronavirus diagnostics, which was exciting. So I got to see some results from that as well.
Yeah, I know New York City got hit very hard, so I'm sure that kept you busy. So my question for Jackie is, you know, typically when I think of people going to biomedical school, medical school, not biomedical school, they, you know, go to school to be a doctor. And it sounds like you have a lot of extracurriculars, which does not surprise me. Would you say that's pretty standard for a doctor to have, you know, you're doing all the cancer in rural places research, the simulators and the device development, or is that stuff you sought out to keep connected to your biomedical background?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in surgery specifically, there's kind of two pathways you take if you go into surgery. One is to be a community surgeon, meaning you would go and work in like a private hospital that doesn't do like a lot of extra research or things like that, which is an awesome way to go if you don't like doing research or like projects in addition to operating. Well, the other pathway you can go is a little bit more academic. So you're at like in the university setting, which is where I'm at. And that's what I'm training to do. So if you want to be an academic surgeon, typically you do 2 years where you're just operating. You're not actually doing a lot of extra projects. You have to do some towards your graduation. Like we have to do a quality improvement project, which is funny because, you know, you learn how to do quality stuff in engineering too. But you have to also do one research project to meet your graduation requirements. But most of us, you know, you have time in your day to kind of fit in different projects. When you want to go into academic surgery, you step out and you do 2 years of research. And during those research years, you're not, you know, the last time I operated on someone was in January. I took a weekend of call and I did a kidney transplant. And before that, it was last July. So when we're out in our research years, we don't typically operate a whole heck of a lot. And the only reason that I helped out in July is because we were short people because of COVID, and because of a couple of my female colleagues being on maternity leave. And, you know, so I had no problem, you know, taking a weekend to go help out while one of my coworkers is home with their new baby. So that's why I have all the time to do the projects I'm doing right now. But when I go back, like July 2022 back to the clinical work, I'll definitely scale back my projects a lot. And at that point, I will probably only work on projects related to trauma and critical care, and then my device projects. And that will be, you know, enough to keep me busy. The cancer research that I'm doing right now, that's what I'm funded to do through our National Institutes of Health. So that's what pays my paycheck. And that's like the type of research that our department has funding for while we're out on our research years. So that is, you know, the area that we research through that. But I've been fortunate because I'm not going to be a surgical oncologist, that I have mentors in other areas as well who have allowed me to continue that research during this time too. So it's kind of weird, and it all has to do with your funding, but hopefully that gives you a sense of how things go.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't think I quite connected that you were on the academic route. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I don't think I clarified that very well earlier.
So Nicole, I know you've worked on helping to develop a few devices. Which has been your favorite or most proud device development?
That's a good question. A lot of the devices that I've been working on are more like product line expansions. So you have a current product and you want to just expand on it a little bit to make it applicable to other types of maybe like a market segment that you're targeting. Now I'm getting all businessy because I'm trying to learn all these new words, but so one of our devices is manual disinfection for ultrasound probes. And so it's basically just like a container that you would soak a probe in disinfectant, but it has a ventilation system so that it's safe for people to use. And we had it so that it could be used for ultrasound probes, but probably one of my favorite projects was working on it to get it expanded to be used with endoscopes, which is a different type of device, but just learning like about that different type of device and how we would be able to manipulate what our current product was in order to work for those as well. It was just cool to be able to work with customers on getting that input and then also just seeing it through to the end of, development, testing, and then release. So that was probably one of my favorites, is just targeting a whole new market that could benefit from our product.
Awesome. So my next question, I know you guys have talked a lot about your favorite parts of your job, but if you were to name your most favorite part of your job, what would it be? And then what's kind of the least favorite part of your job that, we all have those things that we put up with because we love the favorite part that much better. If you could share that with us.
Yeah, so my answer is going to be a little different. My favorite part of my job and my least favorite part of my job are actually the same thing. So my least favorite part my most favorite part is learning. So I feel like throughout my career, I've gone, from engineering to more of a business role. And so I've just learned just so many different things and so many different ways of thinking. And so I think that's just been really cool to just like continuously learn, more about this field. But I would say my least favorite thing is also that, because I've run into situations where I have no idea what the heck I'm doing, and that's very stressful and very just difficult to manage. So I think, you just have to power through and realize that you're not going to know everything. And the challenge of learning is supposed to be a challenge. You're not supposed to get it right away. And so enjoy the ride while you're doing it, is what I'm trying to keep reminding myself.
My absolute favorite part of my job is actually the very beginning part of a new project. So in our lab, when you're thinking of moving into a different project or kind of changing the scope of the project, what we do is we meet as a big group. So we have 12 PhD students and a couple faculty members, and then sometimes postdocs will come in and we'll discuss an idea or multiple ideas. And it's just like the brainstorming, everyone gets involved, and then seeing where that can go. So the really initial building of prototype, seeing if it works, trying to prove that the concept might be a viable option as a device or as a diagnostic test. I really, really enjoy that. And so you get a lot of really interesting ideas that sometimes sound really strange, but those have led to really interesting devices that can be really useful too.
Yeah, so I mean, the favorite part of my job might be kind of obvious, but it's, seeing my patients get better. But I think that the cool part about it is that it's something that, I've done, with the help of all this technology and all these things. And when a patient comes to us with a problem, we're there to solve it and fix it, just like engineers are. And what I think is like the most rewarding or the most fun times is when there's a patient problem, a patient's problem that comes to us that doesn't really have a clear answer, that you can innovate and you can come up with something new, you can come up with a new solution. And so I think that's probably my favorite part. My least favorite part by far is all the darn paperwork. I hate sitting behind a computer and, typing up basically a documentation of my interaction with the patient. Like, I just want to take care of them and get them on their way, send them home feeling better without having to sit in front of a computer a couple hours a day writing notes. So, but right now that's the way things are. Communication is really important. I think someday we'll have some sort of Alexa style technology that'll just like automatically document everything in our day for us, and I won't have to do it again. And I hope that someday comes soon. But until then, I'll still suffer writing notes.
I feel like that's spoken like a true engineer. I know I was never a fan of writing papers, and that's why I did engineering and excelled at it.
Yeah,
So Jackie,
Epic fix your spelling, so you don't have to worry about the poor spelling.
I was gonna say I used to work at Epic, and that was like one of the projects they were working on when I was there, is how to make it so doctors didn't have to be on a computer.
oh, that's awesome. Maybe in the future, Jackie. Okay, so Jackie, I do have one question from the SWENExt ladies regarding your experience in the medical field using bioengineering. If someone younger found an interest in pharmacy and bioengineering, what advice would you give them regarding courses and if they change their mind later on, kind of what route would you suggest that they maybe take if they're interested in bioengineering and pharmacy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think like either biomedical engineering or chemical engineering is going to be the way to go if you're also interested in pharmacy, especially because pharmacy is a lot of chemistry actually. So the medications that we all take, a lot of that is chemistry, but also a lot of it is getting into actually like the nanotechnologies. So in that you kind of get in the biomedical engineering thing. So like Edward, I forget his name, one of the professors at Iowa, he's working on like nanotechnology for drug delivery, and that's becoming huge. And you have to be more in the biomedical engineering side of that, and then just take some chemistry classes, kind of combine those together to get what you need. But yeah, if you're interested in pharmacy, that's the route I would kind of suggest. And I do see in the future, I think a lot of there are things like in my world right now that we treat surgically that I think, will be treated with medications, and we're getting close. Like cancer, there are so many more targeted therapies, and that's a mixture of, the chemistry and the pharmacists and the people who work with antibodies, like Rose, some of the people that she probably works with as well. These people all put their heads together to create these patient-specific treatments for cancer. And so it's a great field to go into if that's something you're interested in. It's going to be skyrocketing, I think, over the next few years, especially when it comes to cancer treatment and personalized medicine.
Awesome. So we're gonna, go ahead.
Thanks, Jackie.
Do you guys have any other, we're gonna do our last question, and I'll let you guys take the last question, or I can ask it as well.
No, they're all good. You go ahead.
Okay, awesome. So our last question of the day, can you guys share a time that you failed, and what did you do afterwards to overcome this failure? What did you learn from that failure?
Yeah, so I'll go first. Mine's specifically related more to project management. So that's where you would be leading the project, and you would be telling, your design engineers how to build or what they should be designing. You tell quality, okay, now it's ready to be tested, and then so on. So you're managing the project, right? And so it was my first decently large project that I was working on, and I was used to my department telling the engineers what to do, but I wasn't used to ensuring that other departments that are also involved in the process are doing what they're supposed to do. So when you're an engineer or project engineer, you don't only work with engineers, you work with all sorts of people. So you work with your sourcing department, so that they can make sure they get the right supplies for you. You work with technical communications to make sure that they have the instructions written for the customer based off of the device that you design. There's a lot of different groups that you interact with. And so I had made the assumption that for a project that we were trying to, get rid of and replace with this new project, I just assumed that the sourcing department who supplies the product or make sure we get it from suppliers, that they were on board and knew exactly what was going on with the project based on the emails that I was sending to them, obviously, but I never had those in-depth one-on-one conversations with them to ensure that they knew what my project was and knew exactly what was needed from them. And also being new, I didn't exactly know what I needed from them. So I was ready to release the product, and then the sourcing department told me, well, we still have 6 months of product on hand and we can't just get rid of it. That's going to cost $1 million. So we need to keep selling this product, and you can't release your product. You have to wait 6 months. And so then I had to tell management, hey, this product was supposed to be released in October, but we have to wait till February. And they were not happy about that. So I had to figure out a way to release kind of this like deviation part number so that we could sell both at the same time, which is not a great process because things get missed and things did get missed. So something that I learned is just don't make assumptions on that everyone knows what's going on with your project. You have to make sure you're clear and that they give a clear response back so that you know that they understand what you're doing. So that's something that I learned.
I have had many failures, but I guess like one thing that kind of sticks out in my memory is my very first internship. I was just finishing my sophomore year in college, so I was kind of like new to this whole engineering thing. And I was working as an electrical engineer, and I had to order a connector for different wires. And I ended up ordering a connector that was actually 100 times bigger than I thought it was. And so this thing like comes in a package. It's like huge. And it was supposed to be this like tiny little connector for this board that we were making. And I actually still have that giant connector because they didn't need it. Like we didn't need it. And so I remember telling my boss, I was really nervous because this was my first job and I don't come from the traditional like electrical engineering background like the other interns. I was doing more biology, but it was for a medical device. And so I was like really nervous telling my like mentor about it. And he just laughed and was like, it's totally fine. Like just order the right one. And I kind of realized at that point that it's okay to like mess up sometimes. And especially for something as small as that, like you don't need to get down on yourself, but you do need to fix it. So you need to take the steps in order to learn what size connector you need at that point and check the units. And so I've kind of used that in my grad school experience when a lot of my experiments fail because no one knows what's going to happen. And if it doesn't turn out the way I want it to, it could be for a variety of reasons. And that's always okay. And you just have to learn from it and try it again.
Okay, so this wasn't my like brightest shining moment, but it was definitely a learning experience for me. So as a surgery resident, we have a lot of responsibility. And part of that is taking care of patients overnight. And I had a really sick patient one time who came in who needed an emergent procedure overnight. And I feel very comfortable with devices given my engineering background and how to use them and things like that. But I went to do this procedure on this patient. And I realized as I was doing the procedure that my needle was never going to reach into the patient's chest because the patient was too large. And I was so like, I felt like such a failure because I should have known that, you know, the patient's size would not accommodate the device. And so I had to like waste a whole, you know, tray of instrumentation because I couldn't do the procedure with it. And I had to get a whole new tray and a whole different device to be able to do the procedure on the patient. And so that was one time I felt like I like really failed at using my brain because I should have like thought about it beforehand. And it's no big deal for the patient. Like they're asleep and, they don't get charged for the device that wasn't the right one and things like that. But I ended up having to do an open procedure because I couldn't do the minimally invasive one on the patient. And so, sometimes you feel like you really fail someone in that sense, because you want to do the least invasive procedure for them. And if he was borderline, I would have probably still tried it. And if it wouldn't have worked, then I would have gone to the more invasive approach. But it's always a little bit more, I take it a little bit more personally when my failures, come with patients. And so you want to do the best you can for patients, and you can't fix them all. But you have to learn from those situations and know that every patient's different, and you have to be adaptable, like these guys are talking about. So if something fails, it's okay. But you need to think quickly on your feet and figure out what those next steps are. You need to communicate with your team and get the job done. And so I think, if you guys don't go into engineering, I think that's a lesson that you can take with you, because in any job you have, my significant other's a teacher. And if the way you're teaching kids doesn't work out, you try something else, so I think it's a really important skill that you guys will learn. It's okay to fail. We've all failed. I failed a math test in college and I was like, oh crap. And you know what? I worked my butt off the rest of the semester and I still got an A- in the class, even though I failed the first midterm. And it was because I didn't understand one concept. And you know what? I still remember the concept to this day because I worked hard to figure it out. But it's just all about how you respond to those moments in your life. Any successful person will tell you they've had 1,000 failures, but they're looked at as successful for maybe that one success. So just keep that in mind.
Wow. Well, thank you, ladies, for sharing all your biomedical experiences with us and insight. I know I'm thoroughly impressed. So I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for us too.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. And Linda, will you just share the recording with me when you guys are done?
Yep, we'll do.
All
Perfect.
right, you
Thank
guys
you.
have
Thanks,
a great
Rose. Thanks, Jackie.
Saturday.
Thanks, Jill.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.